All right, you guys, we are back on Willow's Bloom and Infinite Soul. We are still working on a name for this podcasty thing.
This astrology show.
Explicitly
combining understandings, Gemini and Sag forces.
The opposing forces.
However.
And today we're going to be talking about Mars, so we're continuing on in the planetary relationship segment. So we are going to be looking at the meaning of Mars specifically in dynamics and look at it in each of the signs, and we're going to try to make this in 1 hour. So we've got this. Okay, so what do you want to start off by saying about Mars?
So let's break this down. So if we were talking within the two main planets of the major benefic of Venus and a malefic of Mars, feminine and masculine energy, I like to, there's a lot of things we could say about Mars, but when it appears in a natal chart, we would look at Venus as much more kind of, in my opinion, more the romantic relating kind of element, but Mars is a lot more about the physical passion, the sexuality of the sign. And so, it definitely affects males and females way different in many other places. But we're definitely talking about the masculine energy and how one derives themselves jumping into a project or even into a courtship, if you will, or however so.
Yeah, and it's also the planet that's involved in the way that we fight. So when you want to understand how two people approach expressing really intense emotions, especially like anger or even setting boundaries, like any kind of really masculine energy in the relationship, you want to look at the synastry between their Mars and see if they are working in cohesion, like they understand each other and they process the energy the same way, or is their energy directed in completely different ways, and that can cause harm to the relationship.
It also it helps with good healthy friction sometimes. It's definitely more of a sexuality placement, but when you get into a project or when you're creating something, I always find that Mars is active, especially when it's doing something together. So if it's playing a game or it's playing a sport or doing a new activity, you can almost indefinitely see Mars is going to show up for both partners and the way they're jumping in and asserting themselves into the situation.
I'm just laughing because me and my boyfriend have opposite Mars signs, and we just did a project the other day together, and I was just like, I want to do it this way, and he wanted to do it. He has Mars in Aquarius, and so he wanted to it was an art project, and there's specific protocol to follow to get the look of it. It's supposed to look like this.
Right.
And that is his.
The paintings. The paintings, perfect examples.
Yeah. And so it was supposed to have these cool blotches and designs and swirls, and it can't do that when you don't do it properly. There's a science to it, essentially. And he's like, I just want to just go for it, and he wanted to do things his own way and his own idea. And I was just like, oh my God, I can't. It was just the clash of the wills there. The way that we approached the project was completely different. And it's because I think in a lot of ways with those opposite Mars signs, that is an incompatibility where we want to approach things differently or even maybe argue about things differently. Or, the passion comes up in interesting ways.
Now, I will say this, Mars in any aspect, when we share this video with y'all, we have a new guest, this Merlin, to join us. But when we have any aspect, when we're speaking upon this video, we're basically going to be looking at Mars just in a neutral, no aspected zone of how it expresses itself. But when we do get a trine, a square, or an opposition, you're going to have all these different combinations. And anytime that shows up in your environment, it has a benefic reasoning for that to be there. So even when something could be like an opposition or a square, I find those are moments to transform and enhance how you understand how your Mars works. But almost indefinitely, some of these things can hit us differently than how Venus might feel like we might not be able to express ourselves. Mars might experience more frustration within this case. It's definitely my ego and kind of an atomic part of your ego and how I self-preservate my ego,
Right.
is how Mars is kind of expressing itself and exerting itself, especially.
Right,
So
right. Like the sun has a lot to do with the ego, but then, like he's saying, Mars is protecting the ego. Mars is the
it's the
willpower.
soldier with the king kind of
Yeah,
vibe to the sun. Yeah.
exactly. So, yeah, you don't want to piss off the soldier. And sometimes people have soldiers that are doing really different things, but it's largely going to depend on what's going on in the rest of the chart, how that affects you guys. But it can be
Hmm.
helpful just to know, where is my Mars? What
Very
sign
much.
is it in? How is my relationship with my willpower? With my masculine, what am I
Hmm.
attracted to? How do I go about initiating things? That's all kind of Mars energy in a relationship and within yourself.
I mean, definitely for males and females that get affected. Obviously, Mars is going to be way more active for the males, and Venus for the females. But it's also how about you're using this energy, and it's not just about like sexuality and stuff like that. It is your passion. It is your drive in the most positive form. Mars is what drives you into creating something. And so I think it's very beneficial to know not only you or your partner's Mars, but how are like to solving infinite amount of problems can happen from just the awareness of this. Oh, this is how one approaches a situation. I mean, I've seen Mars is prevalent to just playing a video game with a couple people. How do they strategize? You
Mm.
know, or like if we go about doing a project, everyone has a different methodology to the way they drop in. And so the base form that I realize is that this is how masculine energy is expressed, at least within the males. And what I understand is that this is an area where females are attracted to said Mars because
Mm-hmm.
of like kind of where that masculinity and masculine energy pulls them in their chart. When you want to,
Which makes a lot of sense. My Mars is in Leo. My boyfriend's ascendant is in Leo. So my Mars is actually on his ascendant. So he's embodying part of the masculine energy that I'm more naturally gravitating towards. So yeah, it can
mm-hmm.
show a lot about what you desire, and it can show as a man a lot about how you express um, part of your
Mm-hmm.
masculine side.
Again, to just reiterate, especially teamwork or projects or anything that you're going to have to drop into, Mars has now become quite active in that situation. So we're going to drop into the 12 signs and in the elements and
Yeah.
just kind of share some of our 2 cents a little bit
Yeah.
for each different sign.
I guess the only other thing that I want to say based off of what you just said is like the physical aspect of Mars. So not just
Hmm.
projects, taking action,
Physicality.
but yeah, anything physical like sports. So any kind of shared activity in regards to like physical movement as well.
Hmm.
So, all right, let's go ahead and get started with Mars and
I'm
Aries.
very down. Mars in Aries. So if Venus was in detriment, this is where Mars is at home. And I know that it has 2 rulers of Aries and Scorpio, and we'll drop into that. But I almost feel like Mars gets one of its fullest energies in Aries. We got the most masculine sign, in my arguable opinion, about and the masculine planet in its sign. So when I think of Mars in Aries, I'm definitely thinking of like a surreal confidence, not afraid to kind of take shots, take names,
Mhm.
move things around. A lot of physical energy, a lot of work ethic can be in this Mars. I really genuinely kind of cliche see the Spartan soldier charging into kind of situations. When I've seen a Mars in Aries, even for females, they'll be the first to step up. I'll go first.
Mm,
I'll show you what I'm made of. I'm kind of here to bring it a little bit,
right.
and I'm not saying it's not it's bold and it has a little bit of gallantry. I've definitely seen men with this. There's, you know, we could say like high sex drive, high energy levels, high competitiveness. Competitiveness is there almost is like a spice for competing and
Hmm.
seeing who's going to be number one. That kind of feeling is very Mars and Aries, but it's definitely the active drive to just begin, start it, jump in, almost viscerally, like just kind of jump into life. So the nervous system needs that kind of like challenge, so to speak. I mean,
Yeah, and I mean, if you are using Mars as an indicator of your willpower, being in the sign of Aries, which it's at home in, means that you kind of have no impediments to your expression of your will and your desires, which means that you do just jump right in. You might even do so impulsively because that's really stereotypical of Aries.
Almost will start learning, at least at an early age. They're very
Yeah.
impulsive.
It's like they learn through doing, I think, in a lot of ways. Or they're very experiential individuals. And so if you translate this into a relationship dynamic, I
Mm-hmm.
think this would be coming across as like maybe a more dominant type of personality. It would depend on the rest of the chart, but definitely somebody who's not afraid to take the lead, who's not afraid to court the other individual, or if they have an issue, they're not afraid to stand up for themselves, address the issue, kind of lay things out as they are. So it's not an avoidant kind of personality in terms of conflict and in terms of pursuing what they desire and expressing their will. So this can be really interesting if they pair up with somebody who has trouble with that.
Mm-hmm.
That might be a scenario. I mean, who really knows? But we tend to attract opposites in a lot of different situations.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think
It's a
it
polarity.
exactly.
Yeah.
These are very strongly instinctual people. So they are just getting that gut feeling and moving forward with it, like an animal instinct almost. So I think that in the relationship, they can be extremely passionate. Like I said, maybe jumping in a little bit quick, especially sexually. They might just
Mm-hmm.
kind of dive right in unless there are aspects with Saturn going on. But they might just be unafraid to kind of pursue all these different partners. And it
Mm-hmm.
depends again on the rest of their chart, but there is this kind of ferociousness to their passions and
Mm-hmm.
desires.
Definitely can say like sometimes this Mars can let their ego get ahead of them sometimes. It's definitely to I'll show I it's not Muhammad Ali that has this, but that quote, I'll show you how great I am. There's a little bit of that zest within a Mars and Aries, and I feel like won't back down to a challenge. And sometimes a little bit of the challenge kind of sparks that Mars to engage. And with a healthy outlet for something that's a very firepower kind of situation that needs some like channeled energy, like they need physical energy, physical exertion or
Mhm.
something to help channel that energy. Otherwise, this is a definite Mars that can get very frustrated quite quickly.
Mhm.
So to steam down, there needs to be a healthy outlying of using energy. So usually it does embody physical sports, but anything to help this person kind of express themselves or like get it out of their physical body. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Steve Jobs has this placement, so that can be an interesting example of. I'm a little bit nervous about the cat and the
He's
dog.
very good. Yeah.
um, so
Don't
I
worry.
think that kind of competitiveness and this disagreeableness that can sometimes be there, because Mars is again like this is what I want, so I'm gonna go get it, especially in the sign of Aries. And I
Mm-hmm.
know that Steve Jobs actually had a lot of conflict with the people that he worked with, and it's because he was like it was my way or the highway. And so this again, depending on the rest of their chart, this could be a potential with people with Mars and Aries, especially if they're on like the lower vibration or they're living in the shadow in a specific moment. They might have this kind of selfishness or stubbornness about what they want in their life and not necessarily always consider the partnership or how it affects the people around them.
Last couple notes. I don't think this is a Mars that can be tamed. It must be channeled.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. You don't want to try to change them. You want to try to give them a focus. I love that. All right, Mars and Taurus.
So the antithesis flip.
Right. Mars is in detriment in Taurus. So where it's at home in Aries, it's flowing. It slows down a lot in Taurus
Very
and
much.
it's more calculated. It's more practical. It tends to think more long term. But then the element of I guess, expressing your anger and expressing your willpower, it's kind of like this really slow burn, you know? Like it takes them a long time to actually get angry enough to say something or express something about their boundaries being crossed. And in terms of like going after what they want, I feel like this can be beautiful in the sense that they can have a lot of more sustained effort over time for like long term goals. But in general, they might have greater trouble with like the decision making process because Taurus slows things down and Mars is again our instinct to
Mm-hmm.
act, the impulse that we have. And so it's not that there's self doubt, it's that I mean, it could come from self-doubt, but there's just a slowness in the process, where it might be beneficial to act quickly.
You know, we didn't open up with this, but like Mars definitely can affect your physical body and the appearance of the physical body. And like when Mars comes into Taurus, we're in a detriment place for Mars. And so in a place where we need to take instinctual action, maybe even survival action, Mars in Taurus takes a much more sedentary kind of approach in certain places. So it takes, the one thing though is I think misunderstood, Taurus is much more rudimentary, like what works, and get back to basics and work on the basics as good as we can. But I also find this to secretly be an extremely powerful Mars when you develop the habits to building something. One thing that I keep noticing though is some people can get they can get really like as if like there's a lot of substances. Sometimes these people like love to eat a lot, smoke a lot, drink a lot. Mars kind of gets that feeling of indulgence that can take place. I've seen it quite a couple times, especially with masculine energy, males. But when Mars and Taurus, I think sometimes can have even bulkier, larger kind of like endomorphic body type sometimes, especially for males. But it's one thing is like I call it like a locomotive train. It takes so hard for Mars and Taurus to like kind of get going. But once it gets going, it's built that habit, it kind of is there. So this is one thing to note. Really astonishing for building good habits, really difficult for breaking bad habits, and should be taken quite seriously. But I also find when someone's on a good track of routes and how they're living their life, Mars and Taurus loves to keep cultivating and sticking to what it loves to do best.
Yeah,
So,
and I think in terms of relationships, that can show a lot in one's loyalty. So maybe sticking with somebody
mhm,
longer than you actually should. You know, when the
mhm.
momentum is there, you kind of hang on a little bit. Like you're putting more energy into things, even though it might be better to be a little bit more impulsive and end things quicker. Mars and Taurus really has to like play all out sometimes. So yeah, the momentum is such a thing with Mars and Taurus individuals.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
yeah, so if Mars and Taurus was with someone like with Mars and Aries, they would have a totally different way of expressing
Very. You could
anger.
notice it. You could notice it very strong.
Yeah, like Mars and Aries in the moment would just say exactly what they think, and would express any negative feelings. And then Mars and Taurus, I feel like it would have to build and build and build until one day
It's an
they
earthquake.
express it. Yeah.
And sometimes there's a lot of remedies. That's why I said like if they're not expressing their anger, sometimes they might eat their anger. They might like smoke their anger. They
Mm,
might drink there's that physical Venusian qualities coming in through Mars to satisfy and satiate it. So it's kind of
yeah.
coming out in a different expression. It's not a fire planet. It's much more that kind of earthly kind of like I'm upset and this is how I'm taking care of that. Or when they're excited about something, it's usually got to be something that's like beautiful and accentuating and like delicious or something like that.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, and I think there can be sometimes like a sluggishness to this because Mars is part of like what animates us and brings us energy. And so in Taurus, it kind of slows that process down a little bit. So they need to be with somebody who has predominant earth in their chart or who
mm-hmm.
enjoys maybe having a lot of time off. Um, you don't want to have a partner who doesn't understand your need for rest or why you're a slower person in general.
Right,
Maybe you speak slower, maybe you move slower. Like if you're with a Mars and Aries, that might trigger them because they're just
right.
fast in everything in their life.
This is definitely not to criticize in any shape or form, but maybe Mars and Taurus might want to really look. That is a very stubborn placement. And I just want to say that with compassion, though, is also to know like where you might be stuck, getting yourself stuck in a rut. And Mars and Aries is actually a placement that's trying to, hey, let's break out of the ruts constantly. Like, let's keep looking at that. So it's not to compare, it's just to understand how this can best be resolved to get the biggest impact for yourself and for someone else. So,
Definitely. Mars in any of the fixed signs definitely has a level of stubbornness that I think can make relating and connecting and harmonizing with others a little bit more challenging because usually there's a desire to be right. Mars has this desire to dominate, triumph, be the winner of an
Preserve
argument,
itself. Yeah.
preserve itself rather than preserve the relationship, which is Venus. And so, yeah, and any of the fixed signs, especially Taurus, you're going to notice some of that stubbornness coming through that can lead to a little bit of challenges sometimes. All right, Mars and Gemini.
Mars and Gemini. So I do know that like The Rock and Muhammad Ali have this Mars, and so like the Mars of wits, the Mars of the mind. This is definitely someone or something that I think intelligence or wittiness is something that really comes into play here, but it's definitely I don't know. It feels like it needs activities or engagement or people and socializing. We're allowing like Mars to really express itself. It's definitely someone that has an innate ability to network in a field of a party and might not even know how good they're being at it,
Yeah.
but knows how to make an impact. And people speak well of this kind of Mars, it's kind of secretly or unconsciously in some places. But I find Mars and Gemini has a certain placement of like expressing how it's seen, like it's secretly being talked about or seen in its highlight, and I don't know, it gets a lot more attention than it might even seek for.
Yeah, and I feel like whenever I think about Mars and Gemini or even Mars in the third house, I think about somebody who's like a busybody, and not in the sense that you're just doing a bunch of things that don't matter, but I mean you could, but I think there's some degree of having a really busy schedule. Like I connect with a lot of people and I have a lot of friends and I'm doing a lot of tasks and I'm here and I'm there. It's like this kind of flitting about energy that Gemini has, but on roids because it's Mars and Mars has so much energy backing it. So I definitely think that it's hypercharging the social aspect of oneself, as well as the desire to just learn a lot. I see a lot of these people being just super attracted to and gravitating towards any kind of experience that can teach them things, any kind of new person that can show them different perspectives. They like a lot of stimulus. Like the people with Mars and Gemini might have a slight restlessness of the mind or even of the body, that a lot of stimulus can benefit them. So if you have a partner with this, like challenging them intellectually, doing activities together that that bring you guys like that challenge you essentially, and bring you guys together intellectually. So yeah, those are some things I noticed.
Like there's a lot of ways that this can be expressed itself, because now we are an immutable sign, and so like to not get meddled, like sometimes this is language. This is like an ego of language or wit. I obviously Muhammad Ali was someone that like would die for boxing, and that's a total different form, like because it's almost like about that fast, quick, like calculations,
Yes.
calculations, and so there's this like way that it wants to be intellectualized with. It needs that kind of mental stimuli, and there's many different forms that it can take form, but it's definitely wanting something to be about the intellect. So being like, brought new information or something curious. I know that there is a part of Gemini that wants to be articulate and understanding and aware of like different, like a whole range of stuff. And definitely please correct me on this, but like its curiosity wants to expand and know a couple things about a lot of its environment. It's almost like aware of its environment. So like Mars here gets to actually be stimulated with a kind of like charismatic awareness with its environment, knowing how to like make its environment a way that I've mastered everything. Like, and I just think of that quick energy of kind of like I don't know. There's a little bit of a hummingbird energy I keep getting here, where it's like being able to like pick up and move things and be in a flash, dazzle you, and kind of like do its thing.
Yeah.
And I wish I had more words to describe that.
It reminds me of like a Formula One driver, like the level of maybe like hand-eye coordination and quick movement and quick processing. It's basically associating movement with like the mind's quick processing. So that's why, and especially with Gemini ruling the hands, that's why it makes sense that a boxer would have this placement,
Right.
because they're just like bah, 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 so quick. And yeah, I don't know, sorry I interrupted you.
No. Yeah. But again, just like being able to, they say in the masculine energy is being able to dazzle with its is charismatic. I've heard this even be a car salesman placement.
Oh
Like
yeah.
if some males with a car salesman placement that kind of charismatic can make anyone connect with anyone and make it work for them and to that kind of department. So definitely like I feel like a way to feed Mars and Gemini is feeling confident in their intellect, feeling confident in their wit and their skill, and being able to kind of unconsciously express that out, you know?
I
So,
will say that they know how to bring not only the right words to the scenario, but the energy and the passion behind the words,
mm,
which makes them incredible debaters. So if you are in a relationship with a Mars and Gemini, definitely want to make sure that if you, I don't know, you might just feel like you're in an argument with them and they always have the right things to say. And maybe you're somebody who's just like, you haven't even had enough time to think about it yet. You haven't had enough time to come up with a response yet. So that I could see that being a little bit like frustrating if you know, don't have that same amount of being able to kind of adapt and in the moment know exactly what to say. But I think also just being careful, not that this alone would indicate that, but this with especially with Pluto or other things going on the chart, like when someone's really good with their words, you want to be careful that they're not just telling you what you want to hear or that they're gaslighting you and making you think you're crazy because they're so good at explaining things.
mm-hmm,
And again, Mars and Gemini alone is not an indicator of that, but
mm-hmm.
it can indicate that they have a special ability to do those things if there's that tendency in the rest of their chart.
I definitely feel like it sometimes is super unconscious. Like being asked in a group of people, they might be like self-critical, like I don't know how to describe that, but everyone else might be like you're radiating this perfect charismatic presence potentially. That's what I tend to wonder because I wonder if Gemini is so much in its head, it's not processing like Mars is actually just letting itself express this kind of innate. I know how to connect with my environment more than I even know. And also to just I want to share this is just Mars and Gemini as it is, no other aspect being made. This is not even Mars in retrograde or anything like that. We can
Right.
get into that in another video, but yeah.
Right. All right. So now we are in Mars in Cancer.
Mars and Cancer.
I just had a client who had this with her partner who had Mars in Capricorn.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely really different ways of expressing your willpower, your desire. Like this person really wanted to spend a significant amount of time at home. You know, she was like really motivated
Mm-hmm.
by like getting everything done for the day. And yeah, she does want to see friends, but like there's a really strong impulse to like have rest time, have time in the home to just like be with herself. And also Mars in Cancer, I noticed especially can be super like passive aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about the crab and its movement, it's like literally walk like sidestepping. And so people might kind of sidestep their emotions or their anger and express it in unusual ways. I mean, being passive aggressive really isn't that unusual, but unusual in terms of like the healthy expression of anger and being direct. There's an indirectness to this kind of placement that can lead people to maybe feeling like more resentful and a little bit more bottled up and internalizing a lot of it rather than being super external. So having a part, like if you know your partner has this, it can be really helpful to know this about Mars and Cancer.
So this Mars, we're in the water sign of Cancer, which is the ruler of the moon. So it is actually given the position that this is a fall position for Mars. Although I do not want to look and make it out that this Mars isn't powerful. Because ironically, last year when Mars was in Cancer, I did more physical exertion than I ever did in my entire life. So I was wondering about that one. Yet, this Mars really affects males and females very differently that I've seen. I've seen some positions with Mars in Cancer had been really taken advantage of, or at least like to be like in that position where they're having a dominant figure take care of them. So I've seen like this is a Mars that might be like very vulnerable to situations that they just want to kind of nurture and feel good with and will they're getting a certain form of security. So this Mars doesn't need to kind of like preserve itself or be as brash or upfront or offensive as many other Marses could be. And for males, there's a lot of things that, like, honestly, it's where the flow of what matters to one person, what they're feeling, that I find that this makes this Mars work really strong, or it can be a difficult placement for someone. What I do see though is like when someone's backed by something they care about, and it always takes more of a medic kind of approach of a Mars. You know, this wouldn't be like an infantry soldier. This is more like a medic position.
Oh, okay.
There's much more like on a defensive, let's take care of the home front kind of area.
Defensive. That's the perfect word.
They're more their action is more defensive. They take more of a defensive approach in the way that they take action upon things. They want to make sure everything's good. They might be a little bit more cautious. I would definitely say cautious is the
Yeah.
word. They're not as like making big bold movements kind of thing. It's much more like in behind the scenes. But and the one thing though is, since it's in the water moon of Cancer, you want to make sure that this person is aligned with an earth energy or something they're supporting that gives Mars the preservation to actually back up what it's dedicating to. Because Mars in Cancer, if it's not really feeling so good about something, it might feel like I don't know, like, am I considering this? The soldier's like feeling different about its position sometimes, and so there's might be some constant reassurance. It needs to feel like it knows what its purpose is for Mars to be like really about this, and then the Cancer nurturing element is in full alignment with this position, versus like something like Mars in Capricorn, which just sticks to like the dedicational plan. You know what I mean? It's just like, I said it was going to be here, and boom, it's like holding
Right.
that position. Mars in Cancer might like kind of like, oh well, like it's not that important, or
Right.
depending on the circumstance. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Michael Phelps has this. So in terms of like
Crazy.
physical
Yeah.
stuff, you know, Cancer is water oriented, and if you guys know Michael Phelps, he's a pro swimmer.
He's like the biggest
Olympian.
gold medalist
Yeah.
in the world, right?
Yeah. So I mean, I think that's on his ascendant though. So it's like such
Really?
a big part of his life.
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
So I just think it's super interesting to show like where Mars can show certain physical attributes of ourselves, like in terms of our dexterity or physical abilities. I also have a friend with Mars in Cancer, and he is, I feel like, really motivated by like being romantic. I don't know. I feel like he's really motivated by trying to like go above and beyond for his partners. And I think that's like that nurturing of Cancer. It's like, I am so motivated to show up and show you how much I love you, and through these different ways. And that's going to look different depending on the rest of your chart. But that nurturing ability and that desire to protect what you love is really strong in these individuals. So this is kind of, I perceive this as a little bit of that mama bear kind of energy of like, don't mess with my loved ones, like don't mess with my family. I'm going to show up for them 110%, kind of like a ride or die type of individual in a lot of ways. But there is always a need to feel safe. If they don't feel safe, I feel like they go within, they get defensive. You're not going to get the best version of themselves in that kind of scenario. So there's someone I think that requires maybe more reassurance, or at the very least, like loyalty and feeling like you are dependable, reliable. That's why I think, like you said, having that like earth or structure or stability, like someone that they can really trust and lean on, is going to be super beneficial for them.
It helps keep the flow. It
Yeah.
helps keeps that Mars pushing. And that's really cool for Michael Phelps. Like, doesn't matter if Mars could be in a fall position. Here we have an Olympic gold medal swimmer, you know, in that position. But it's also, there's something really juicy I wanted to talk about. You're saying something about romantic. It's funny because we think like Venus is much more this kind of feminine romantic, but I really think that Mars doesn't get enough credit for being a pushing romantic planet, as something that's like what matters. Like, you know, like wanting like there's like a sense of purpose within Mars. And so Mars in Cancer really needs to figure out what that purpose is. So when it connects to family, when it connects to brotherhood, I also sense high patriotism within this kind of
Mm.
position. If it's for your homeland, Mars feels that connection to awaken that. So I feel
So
like,
yeah, so some people it
yeah.
could be like the country, like homeland. Some people could be to their family. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's a sense of loyalty that they have to the familiar or to their support system,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that is. It will probably vary by individual,
Right.
but definitely a lot about, like you said, needing to connect emotionally to one's purpose and taking action from an emotional point of view.
Mm-hmm.
So that does mean that if there are really big fluctuations in mood, I do think it could really impact the energy levels. Some people like Mars and Capricorn, like you said, there's a level of consistency. Like they're going to show up because they said they're going to show up.
Mm-hmm.
Mars and Cancer is more like it's not that they can't be consistent and dedicated still, but
They
it's
don't
just
feel like it. Sometimes Mars isn't going to show up unless it's got a real feeling that's more powerful
right.
than something else. If there's a feeling I'm doing this for my family's legacy or something,
Right.
some powerful feeling, Mars in Cancer will feel that
Will
and show up.
activate.
But if
Yeah.
it's not like in alignment, that Mars might see like, is it worth it?
Right.
Which has its benefits in ways, but this is why Mars is the soldier might leave its post to go get a cheeseburger because it's hungry.
Right, which is why it's in fall here.
Right.
Because you don't want your soldiers that are not in the mood to show up to work that
Mm-hmm.
day, and you're leaving your land undefended. But yeah. All right,
Boom.
let's go over Mars in Leo. I have Mars in Leo.
Mars in Leo.
Where is yours? Mars is in Capricorn.
My Mars is in Capricorn. We'll get there.
Yeah.
I'm actually a big fan of Mars and Leo because, I mean, a lot of reasons, but, Mars gets to be with honestly, Mars in a fire position usually gets a lot of points, but now it's in the sign of the sun. So I think like Mars and Leo is a pretty awesome, powerful position that has a sense of righteousness to it, I feel, depending on where the Mars is placed. But I guess to just put this out, it's in fixed fire. And so Mars and Leo, though, definitely kind of wants to, a little bit, if anything, especially for males, is a little bit of a dazzling. Like, I need to be noticed. I need to, like, show you, not like Aries where it's about the challenge. It's almost like Mars and Leo is kind of going to kind of like, I don't know, flex its pecs kind of vibe. Like, I don't really know, but like, Mars and Leo definitely is where there's courageousness and they will show up to a cause. And if there's something that really matters to them, I feel like Mars and Leo will really show up and really, and I don't know, there could be a sense of like heroicism that can show up with even Mars and Leo in a way. You were definitely born with this, and I don't know if you want
Yeah,
to share
I've
anything
got a
about
lot
it.
to say. Yeah, I mean, really strong position for leadership. So whatever like house you have
Mm-hmm.
it in, you'll notice that you might tend to kind of step up, take more responsibility, or have this ability to shine in that area of your life potentially, where people kind of will look towards you, and then you can then express your authenticity. I think that's a lot about Mars and Leo being the sign connected with the sun. The idea of purpose, I think, is one of the most important things for a Mars and Leo is,
Mm-hmm.
am I doing something that really feels like it is living in my purpose?
Mm-hmm.
And is it well received? Because there's always that element of the public, of visibility, of performing for a Mars and Leo, whether they want to admit it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's because they truly are trying to live so much in their purpose and they're so passionate that if they do kind of receive negative feedback, or if people in their life don't necessarily recognize them or care, that does really hurt the Mars and Leo individual. So if you are in a partnership with this person, the best thing that you can do for them is, I feel like, give them recognition, listen to them, notice them, give them praise. If they got a haircut, tell them, I
Mm-hmm.
love your new haircut. Like, if you ignore those things, they will feel unseen. And that's where Mars and Leo's ego starts to get hurt.
Right.
And that's where like the negative traits of Mars and Leo can start to come out. So extremely passionate about their purpose, really looking for oftentimes like external validation of some sort, or if they're not looking for it always, they can be hurt by negative external validation.
There's a lot. My father has Mars in Leo, and so like there's a definite sense. There's a lot of whole range about this right now, but it's definitely a very powerful position for showing up and doing its best when there's a dedication to the heart. When there's something to dedicate to, this Mars and Leo is indomitable. But we need to look at like, definitely complimenting the haircut is definitely going to fan any kind of like Leo energy, of course. But I think it's bigger when it's fanning their achievements, fanning their dedications, fanning what matters to them. And there's a lot of range of this because low vibrational Leo and Mars can get very dominating or even like pompous. I think Donald Trump also has an extremely out of like it's maxed out Mars and
I
Leo.
think it's in the 12th too.
It's
So
12th house
very
on his
unconscious.
on his ascendant.
Yeah.
So it's like maxed out Mars
Yeah.
and Leo. So like
You can see that he's a perfect example
that's
of the
I had to bring it
negative
up.
vibration.
If you can see Mars and Leo on a human, it's Donald Trump. Like
right, the negative.
And so we can look at and like all the judgments aside, it's just how like if there's an area where it's dedicating, it's willing to show up. I don't know how old the guy is at this point, but Mars and Leo will still activate that nervous system. But also when it's in a lower vibrational Leo, it's definitely kind of like I need power, I need control, I need to dominate the situation.
It's super ego driven, and like regardless of what your political stance is, I think everyone can see that Donald Trump does have a high level of ego in his work. And so I think that that's a huge
Pride.
thing. The
Yeah.
pride. Oh my God. Yes. Mars and Leo, that was actually a huge issue for me when I was much, much younger. I've worked on that, and I think I've resolved a lot of it. But just like receiving feedback or getting into an argument and wanting to be right, because if I lost face, that meant I lost pride, and that was like the ultimate no, because Mars again is the protector of the self, and Leo is like our pride, our
It's like
ego,
our heart's truth,
our
kind of thing.
heart, and it's like it's a little bit more fragile in a Mars and Leo individual. And so I had to really relearn how to take those things constructively and not just like shut down or like lash out, kind of like, oh, you're not right. And I think that is like the toxic side of Mars and Leo coming out when someone hasn't learned to master their ego.
I will say though, when Mars is driven by the heart or for something for true love or true purpose, this Mars is the fixed fire of the sun, and I really find like there's almost nothing that can stop you, kind of thing. And a mere like that light can shine extremely bright with this situation. It also is, and there is, like you said, leadership abilities with this. However you want to look at it, it rubs off on other people of like, how much am I willing to put into something that I really care about? And that might be like, wow, like, there's an inspiration and innate leadership abilities to get people on a bandwagon and build great things with this Mars. So,
and Beyonce has this. So I feel like that just summarizes
Boom.
everything we just said.
Kaboom. Thank you, Beyonce.
All right, Mars and Virgo.
I know more females with this than males. I know like almost 8 or 9. My mother has this placement, but Mars and Virgo definitely like loves or needs to be of help, almost wants to be called on for help. Like, please, can you help us?
Make me feel useful.
Like, I want to feel useful, and if not like called upon, it might not feel that kind of energy. But I've seen like Mars and Virgo will get into the roughest, dirtiest stuff to make beautiful things happen. It could be like, professionally keeping something alive, clean. I've seen women do like hardcore plumbing or like take care of things that they want to do, and that's like a love language. Like, hey, I can show up to bring this. Like, we can make this happen. So I like Mars and Virgo. I don't look at this as anything. There's just a way of like detail oriented. Sometimes my mother used to make the most beautiful gift wraps. Like, if you got a gift on Christmas, it was like gold was shimmering from Santa's workshop kind of vibe, you know. And this
Oh
her
yeah.
Mars and Virgo, I totally saw it coming out
Yeah.
in that way. Like she really wanted to design something, knitting, crafting, pottery, something that
Mhm.
one can use their hands. And that's, I guess, more from a feminine with this, but
No, I
yeah,
mean Mars and Virgo, they specialize in using tools to create things.
boom.
So
Probably
these are
loves their
like,
tools.
yeah. So like knitting, using
Mhm.
the knitting sticks. What the fuck are those
The
called?
knitting
I don't know anything.
sewing machines. I
Uh,
definitely see like men that work on their car have their
yes,
tools like
dude.
spyware. Like
Perfect example.
mm-hmm.
Engineers, surgeons, like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, anyone who's like really looking at something with a fine tooth comb, working on small things or intricate things, using tools to navigate things. There's a lot of analytical processes that they're really good at. And Mars is I I'm kind of like, I can't think of the word that I'm thinking of, but Mars is just really good at focusing that energy into something that might seem overwhelming or complex or just too detail oriented for other people. So you want to put them on, maybe some kind of convoluted project, and they are the ones who would, I feel like, be able to take leadership and know how to manage the resources, know how to budget, and like all the little things. I feel like they would excel
Right.
in that area where others might want to look at the bigger picture or be overwhelmed by that.
Right. I also see like, you know, Mars, it might not be like the most glamorous thing to look at like certain minute mundane situations that need fixing or taking care of, but Mars just knows like they've probably had to like be in positions of taking care of reality check stuff.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes it is just doing laundry or
Yeah.
taking care of their siblings or like taking care of pets or something like that. But there's a way that at one point in time, this Mars is, depending on how aspected, depending on a lot of things, but like usually is going to learn how to take care of situations in a grounded, practical approach and do it like right. I don't think this is
Mhm.
just putting into the shop and putting things together.
Yeah.
If anyone's fixed their car, this is going to caliber collision and doing it like thousand point inspection
Yeah.
properly, you know?
Yeah. And when I think of Mars and Virgo, I think of someone who likes to run errands. Like someone who's like,
Mm,
I want to check all this off my to-do list and
mm.
feel super productive, because Mars is,
I
again,
hear that.
our drive, our energy. And Virgo, I think, just gets an ultimate satisfaction in some sense of responsibility, usefulness, practicality, all the little everyday stuff that other people might
Hmm.
avoid doing. You might want to only go grocery shopping once a month. I feel like a Mars and Virgo would be much more willing to go every week, and they would clean their house. And I mean, again, it's going to depend on the rest of your chart, but there is more of a desire there to make sure that you get those things done. So, really great
Hmm.
person to do teamwork with. I think if you had a partner with this, it could be really helpful, to, yeah, for like, basically, I think that they just want to feel useful. So if they're doing something that you enjoy, or they're doing some of the household chores and stuff, telling them how much you appreciate them, recognizing them, kind of a little
Hmm.
bit like Mars and Leo, but in a different way. um
Much more helpful how you've benefited things.
yeah.
Mars and Leo is definitely kind of shining much more kind of more of the fire kind of in philosophical or
And
kind
it's
of
more about them
inspiring. There's more about them, but
a
there's
little
like an
bit.
inspiring energy
Yeah.
where Virgo's actually like practically leaving the place better the way they found it,
Right, like
kind of thing.
telling someone the impact that they made on your day, I think would be even more of a compliment than just
Hmm.
telling them that they're a great person.
When you did that thing where you did my dishes, help buy soap, or like, I know this is like silly things, but my mom used to like craft and like scrub the grout in my like shower, like little things like. I realize now that that person wants, thank you so much. That means so much to me. And like, really, thank you. Like, there's like
Yeah.
something
It's
Mars and Virgo
satisfying.
wants to feel like those little things that you're not seeing matter. And
Yes.
and they do. Like,
So if you
so.
overlook those things, you might see that they're dissatisfied, um, with that aspect of the relationship.
Mhm.
Also, someone with Mars and Virgo, if they are more irritated, it can sometimes come across, instead of just being like super openly angry, it can come across as like being maybe a little bit more critical or nitpicky,
There's
um,
some criticalness for
like
sure.
judgmental, like, oh, that you didn't do that right, like you didn't put the groceries away right, or you didn't put in the dishes right. And so
Hmm. They would definitely have a way of like, this is the way to
this
do
is the
it.
way.
You're washing dishes like left to right. You should be doing it right to left. That's the way you do dishes.
Oh
And I'm
god.
not trying to use that. I'm not using that experience as just my mom. I'm actually speaking a little bit universal
Not
with this.
everyone's gonna be that intense. It's always on a spectrum, but
It's on a spectrum.
yeah. But I mean, I think that it's super important to recognize when your partner is starting to feel that agitation, when they're starting to make these little comments that just like they're not that bad, but they're just like slowly eroding at the relationship. And so
Mm.
what's really going on is that they're upset. Like there's an underlying cause likely. So if you start to see those outward manifestations, it can be helpful to check in, like what's going on today? Like what's wrong? Cuz maybe it is the way that you did that, but maybe it's something more. Maybe it's that they've told you 20 times to please try this a certain way and they feel like you're not respecting them, or I don't know, like whatever it is. It's just helpful to maybe dig a little bit deeper.
Definitely feel like a lot of with this Mars that can help like draw people in or like connect with them in a way is like being able to do small little things. I definitely can see like the way in a Virgo, if the way this person ironed their suit perfectly makes a statement kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's where you can understand, recognize, but also support those kind of Marses for each other, whichever male or female. And I think that's just really beneficial to get the most out of like this relationship because it's extremely beneficial, really helpful people, ready to be on your team and help you go wherever you need to go.
And I'm realizing that we really haven't dove into much about the sexual side of Mars for each of the signs. But Mars and Virgo, I feel like would be really attentive lovers. Like they would care how you feel in a situation.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Mars and Leo might care more about how they feel. Not always going to be the case, but
Even if it's like a lot of, I would definitely say like Mars and Leo could be like more bolder, kind of, especially from masculine energy, like courting. Like I just definitely see that kind of magicianal rose kind of situation, Mars and Leo stuff.
yeah.
And then like, how that all gets played out, that could be made in a different video.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely how you're being able to work in a teamwork situation with this person or how they're coming across,
All right. Mars in Libra.
Mars in Libra.
In detriment here.
A lot to say, but if we can chop it down, Mars would rather be in that Aries situation, getting its hands dirty, jumping into, hey, there's a situation at here, firefighter, let's jump in. Mars and Libra now in detriment definitely wants to be the harmonizer. And so even Mars is now playing, in my opinion, what's called like the ambassador position. That kind of definitely has a need for looking aesthetic, clean, charismatic, professional. Mars and Libra, though, doesn't really want violence in this position. The number one person I want to talk about with Mars and Libra that has it conjunct with the sun is Gandhi. And Gandhi was one of the greatest leaders of all time and led more people on this planet than anyone from the act of his masculinity of no violence. He literally chose to stand for and dedicate to nonviolent confrontation and became the biggest placement where India now got its like independence and was identified as India in, I believe, the late 60s to 70s. And so Mars and Libra definitely doesn't want to be involved in violence. Really good at networking. Really good, probably the best placement of making friends and keeping them for a long time because they're kind of like amiable kind of personality that I feel like gets a lot of points at usually being like quite good looking and like actually gets to make an impression through eloquence versus needing to be ultra brash. But I still look at Libra as a masculine sign. So there's still like a loyal knight kind of in this position, like still like I dedicated, its ruler is Saturn. So like an exalted Saturn is in Libra. So I still feel like if the word is good, if the mission is good, Mars still wants to show up. It just takes it's a lot. I think it questions too much. I think if it's not given like a real good position on this is the mission, this is what needs to be done, this is how we're doing it, Mars and Libra will like outweigh too many options and almost kind of get paralysis on what option should I do next, because I'm trying to make peace with everybody, and I'm not trying to get conflicting here where Mars and Aries is like just pick one, just do it, you know, and Libra one might be like but we're gonna upset these people if we take this action. So in a world leadership, it's like trying to please too many people at once sometimes can stunt Mars and Libra.
Yeah, so it does slow it down because of the indecisiveness factor of them considering so many different perspectives. The beauty of that is, like you said, it does create more harmony in their relationships. However, that sometimes is at their own expense, which is what we see with Libra time and time again, especially when we have Mars here, which is about protecting oneself, one's willpower, one's desires, one's anger, boundaries, all those things. In the sign of Libra, it's so people oriented that sometimes it diminishes the self. It makes you much more prone to being walked over. So this is when I see someone with Mars in Libra, Mars in Pisces, Mars in Cancer, Mars square Saturn, these really softer signs, these really compassionate, loving signs, I often see them struggle a little bit in with anger, and they will often grow up in some kind of situation with some kind of parent who maybe didn't really fully allow them to express their anger, or maybe like the situation they grew up in, it was better for them to be more oriented towards harmony and people for survival. And so sometimes they can then extend that into their adulthood and be a little bit more of a doormat. And that's not always going to be the case. Again, it's a spectrum, but there is that potential there for these individuals to have trouble fully expressing themselves and putting themselves first when they should put themselves first, expressing their anger when it's coming up. They might, like Cancer, have this kind of passive aggressive approach or indirect approach. And so
Right.
I think that's one of the challenges if your partner has this, to getting them to think about themselves and express themselves freely, in which they might have inhibited themselves before.
So like Mars and Libra, definitely for men, it's like making sure that they want to look good. They want to kind of like look fresh and clean and professional in their way, and like leave a remark on that. But like I also encourage in both, especially females, even more so, because there's a tendency to like not want to stir any conflict. Like this conflict doesn't want to even want to. It's almost pacifist, you know? And so like there are moments truly in life where the masculinity is like, hey, let's express ourselves. Let's say what's really going on, because it might harbor so much for peace and name for peace and almost dissolving areas where they need to exert this self. And so like Mars definitely, you know, it can come out, it can tip the scales in Libra. You know, not a good placement for like heavy drinking or like anything that really can throw you way out of bounds if you've been out of connection with that, because, you know, might just like all caution to the wind kind of thing. And Mars and Libra has been trying to hold this peacemaker for a while. But again, you're amazing with people. You're amazing. I would say, especially women, like need to make friends, like need to be a socializer or a party planner or something. But, you know, just making sure that you have yourself or someone else to like know when to make real actions and really like dedicate, not just say it because it sounds great and it makes things happy, but like really jump in, you know?
And the other thing I think is really useful with this is the dedication to equality, because Mars being a fighter and Libra being about justice, this can be really beautiful for people who maybe they're not always willing to stick up for themselves, but they are willing to stick up for others and injustices in the world.
For sure.
So really beautiful placement for people who are lawyers or activists of some sort. And that could come up in the relationship as well, where you, your partner, you know, will defend you when, if needed, essentially. All right, Mars in Scorpio.
Mars in Scorpio.
This is my favorite placement. This and Mars in
Really?
Capricorn. Yeah,
Cool.
I love Mars in Scorpio so much.
Keep flying.
You know, it's partially at
Got
home
excited
here, like Mars and Aries. It also likes to be in Scorpio, and Taylor Swift has this, and I love that because I feel like, I don't know, I just feel like she really embodies this in a lot of ways in her work. She has this kind of really potent, almost like, um, I don't know. I think the reason I love Mars and Scorpio is because in a lot of ways it's antithesis to a Gemini, where they get onto something and they are onto something. Like they go all in on that interest. And because Mars, I feel like energizes that intensity, it makes them just absolutely dedicated to their craft.
Oh
And it's
yeah.
like masters and people who are just profound and have this incredible amount of resilience and energy and effort that they can dedicate towards their goals. And so I see some people who can make really big impacts in their career, and whatever they dedicate their energy towards. And that could be you. You know, if this is a relationship, like maybe you notice that your partner, you know, they are someone that is all in on you. They are focused on you, and that might be really good to be on the receiving end of. Yeah.
Huge fan of Mars and Scorpio. It's an AKA badass position.
Yeah, badass.
Um, there's two people that come up for me, like Mars being in the fixed sign of water now wants to reach as deep to the purpose as possible. Different than the expression of fire, but definitely like wants to like find in the way that can fully dedicate and transform. There's something with definitely the scorpionic penetration situation, not to create a sexual joke, but like there is a high sex drive with Mars and Scorpio, male or female, for sure. Just need to put that out there, but needs to exert itself in a healthy way. One thing though is going to be like a spy position or someone that knows how to kind of move. There's a more intuitive approach with Mars here versus Mars in Aries, which is kind of like beating on its chest and dominating, jumping in, more of that Spartan kind of analogy that I like to use. We got more of a ninja approach
Ooh, I
with
love
this
that.
Mars. And so like there's a way of having to dedicate to the cause, knowing what to do and do it stealthy, cunningly, elegantly, and in a way knows how to show up and break through what you think you know about them. My two favorite people that I think about this is Kurt Cobain and Bruce Lee. And we
Ooh.
need to talk about this because even Kurt Cobain, he had a sun trine with Mars. He was someone that let his emotions push him out of all insecurity. And out of his
Mm,
emotions, you get this kind of really like, I don't know, I just see this smashing guitar thing. Like, you know, like the
yeah.
very like making a statement about it in a very scorpionic, pow in your face thing.
There's something ruthless about Mars and
Little
Scorpio.
actually ruthless is the best word because even one thing to be wary about Mars and Scorpio, I will win no matter what
Yeah.
at all costs. So sometimes like was it worth it and did you need to take it that far is sometimes, but Mars and Scorpio might even win stealthy, and I
Right.
like that
It's not as,
intelligence. Yeah.
yeah, it's like not as in your face of like super competitive,
Right.
like I'm gonna win, but it's like I am going to, I feel like Taylor Swift is a good example. It's like I'm gonna be so good you can't ignore me. And I
Mm.
win by being the effing best, even though I might not have to directly challenge
It
you.
doesn't need to be Leo kind of spark. It's like,
Right.
but you know who won
Right.
kind of vibe.
And there's incredible amounts of self-control with Mars and Scorpio. I feel like they, once they know what they want, they are willing to do what it takes to get there. And that does mean a lot of times, a lot of that self-control. That's why I feel like Bruce Lee is a great example of that.
When we think of Bruce Lee, he is a double Sag, but he has Mars. If you want to watch Mars and Scorpio, he says that quote, "Be like water, my friend." And he has Mars in the 11th house, which he taught martial arts. And just go watch him play ping pong with nunchucks. Go watch Bruce Lee to see Mars and Scorpio in action. He's got nunchucks and he's playing ping pong, flowing like water
Yeah.
in that moment to win on a situation. And I just think like that blows me away because it penetrates your psyche on the ego. Is like Mars is showing up like bam, you know,
Mm.
and I like that Scorpio makes that statement, but it should hit you on a limbic level, you know, that they're willing to do something next level for this situation. You know, definitely do not cross or lie these
Oh,
people.
dude. In
And
a
it's not to be
relationship.
scared, but it's also to say, like, Mars and Scorpio, you said has self-control, maybe in a situation, but sometimes Mars in Scorpio can go a little out of control. Like, I've seen, I'm not saying out of control, but it needs to be having a definite cause, Um,
I feel like it's self-control in the sense that if Mars in Aries gets mad, I could see them just flying off the handle.
they do have a
If
little, they have a
Mars in
temper tantrum.
Scorpio gets mad, I see them getting revenge. And that's
Mm,
planned, that's controlled,
I
that's a
see.
decision. Like it's
I
coming
see.
from this kind of like
From
precision in their behavior rather than this uncontrolled reaction to something.
I've also seen this show up in surgeons.
Mm.
So there's a lot of like the penetration or the like the
The incisions.
incisions kind of
Yeah.
situation. So like sometimes it's like knowing how like
Right.
I'm almost
Yeah.
saying the katana,
The
like
exactitude.
like
Yeah.
and knowing what it is, like I would say a master samurai. We're kind of looking at that
Yeah.
the kind of
Super
outlook for
powerful.
Mars and Scorpio. Yeah.
I will also mention the psychological aspect of Scorpio. It is a water sign, deeply intuitive, as well as very aware of others. And so I feel like Mars and Scorpio might have like a stronger need, especially in a relationship, to understand their partner's motivations. And so I think one of the best things that you can do with the Mars and Scorpio is open up in terms of vulnerability. First of all, getting them to trust you, but also getting them to better understand you, because they're always trying to figure out and strategize and see how everything like works essentially. And that's why I feel like they have that self-control or that precision, is because there is almost like this understanding not only of the mechanical overview of how things function, but then like the emotional and psychological overview as well. And so getting them plugged into that in the relationship where they understand what makes you tick, I think will benefit the partnership. However, I will say that sometimes because they have that understanding of people, if they have some more Plutonian aspects of their chart, they might have really strong powers of persuasion to the point of kind of manipulation. So they might like know, just kind of like Mars and Gemini, if there are other things in the chart showing
Right.
this, they know how to like get into your head. You know what I'm saying? They
There
know.
is a little bit of the potential knowing in the times when to like seduce, or like I think of like a spy. Like I definitely think of like knowing how to like, I'm not gonna say total Jedi mind tricks, but like something with the energy flow at feeling that more water intuitive vibration that they know how to work with. Yeah.
And that could be the win at all costs. Like, oh, in order to get this person, I learn what makes them tick and I do these things. Or like a spy, I, you know, put myself in this situation. I say these certain things and then I get the information that I'm looking for. It's kind of like there's just a lot of power in this sign, not only on the outward level, but psychologically. So that's just something to be aware of. I
Totally.
think. All right, Mars and Sagittarius.
Mars and Sag. I love Mars and Sag.
I like this too.
I think it definitely, Mars gets a lot of points still being in a fire element, and Sag is now bringing that optimistic, philosophical energy of Jupiter. So I've yet to see this situation where I would theorize that Mars in a Jupiter ruled sign wants to kind of like be this like super big winner of something. But like when I see it kind of around the later degrees of Sagittarius, I'm seeing someone that's definitely much more like willing to see the bright side on things, but still also kind of take things where they've never been before in some area. Like Mars is like, I was able to walk this journey for a long time to find this kind of answer or something like that. I just wish at the top of my head I had a celebrity to like.
Kim Kardashian has this.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I have watched Keeping Up with the Kardashians quite a bit. So something I've noticed about Kim's behavior, and I do like this placement, but one of the challenges with Mars and Sag is I do notice like this self-righteousness that comes up with it. Like, I'm right, you know, like this is my belief, or this way of thinking about this is the right way. And like, I don't know, I just see that sometimes with Kim in her in her moments with her sisters, it just seems like, you know, she kind of puts her own ideas like on a pedestal, and doesn't sit and consider everyone else's like life perspectives necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you do so much on a search for creating your belief system, like you're motivated by that higher philosophy, and then once you grab it, it's like you hold on to it really tight and defend it rather than have an open mind to being dissuaded otherwise.
I mean, usually Sagittarius is for a main part is that Sag is seeking higher beliefs and will go about a journey to go find that out. And once it finds considerable truth, it wants to hang on to that ideal and make it universal. And in many ways, the highest form of this is actually bringing beautiful principles of wisdom to people that is willing to go on that pilgrimage to go bring that back. The only thing is where Gemini also helps balance out Sagittarius is where we become muddled, stuck, and some of the Sagittarius has become like, I know all, and Mars is trying to preserve that, you know, in this placement, where then they might need to learn more and continuously learn more. I will say, though, that Mars in Sag will still always want to be a lifelong student, or
Yeah.
like still want to keep striving for more, unless it falls into such a rut, you know, unless it's like,
Right.
I've already learned everything, I don't need to learn anything anymore. And so there's other things in the chart that could change that. But I will say, like, definitely someone that has energy. I see traveling coming into this person's life for sure, or the desire to travel, or the wonderment of what travel will bring. So there's even luck here with that. I also see, like, I don't know, I'm definitely seeing the soldier that traveled to different countries and brought those stories back to share kind of with people. And something about that experience is giving that Mars ability to see beyond a little bit more. So,
Yeah, there's something really expansive about Mars and Sagittarius that is willing to take risks. I think Mars is already a bold, risk taking planet, and so is Sagittarius as a sign. And so these combined, I think, create individuals with exciting lives, with exciting stories to tell, like things that they've
mhm.
experienced. And I think in a relationship, kind of like Mars and Gemini, they will need stimulation, and not just from information that they're maybe listening to or reading about, but like life stimulation, like going out there and trying new things and doing new things. And Mars and Sag individuals can become extremely masterful at multiple different things. That's why I think it's interesting that Kim is trying to do like to be a lawyer of some sort now, because I'm like, actually, with someone like her with Mars and Sag, she could be a master at this business, and then a master on this TV show, and then a master lawyer. Like, she really could do those things. You know, I know people want to write the Kardashians off as dumb, but you don't get to that level being dumb. And I think that's the Mars and Sag kind of energy is you might see them being adventurous and playful, but like don't discount them, because they have an incredible amount of perseverance and a desire to just expand, that they can become really, really good at a number of things.
A huge way that I want to express that I know that Mars in Sag, when it's come through transit in many ways, I can't speak to the Kardashians because I don't know them intimately enough to speak on this, but I do know that Mars becomes kind of a pioneer in Sagittarius. Let's go where no one's gone.
Yeah.
And let's see how far we can take this. I've seen, like, you know, like Mars is like ready to just make it happen through its optimism of Jupiter. So it's like, we're going to go travel the world. How are we going to do that? I don't know. We're just going to do it. And like that
They'll
kind
make
of,
it happen.
they will make it happen. We'll find a way. Optimism is what's kind of like, whoa, okay, Mars is ready to go. And there's like a joke, like, we're going to Africa. How are we going to do it? And it might sound a little crazy at first, but it's like, I don't know. We'll just go. And something about that leaping in, get your bags, we're leaving tomorrow, we're not even going to think about it, is pretty Sagittarian. Like,
Yeah.
but it also opens up like, wow, this is a journey, let's see how far we can go. And so, like, I think Mars is kind of like reminding kind of the, like, there is more that you can see, there is more that life has to offer. And so that Mars kind of want to like show you what it can do, kind of thing.
And in terms of relationships, someone with a Mars and Sag is going to need a lot of freedom and space.
For sure.
So if you are not out there exploring with them, if you are tying them down, limiting them, and I said this about Venus and Sag as well, it's going to feel like repulsive in some type of way, because their instinct, like we've been talking about, is to expand and explore, and you can't limit that. And a Mars especially will bring out that
Mm-hmm.
desire to
He'll get righteous.
defend itself, like
Mm-hmm.
to protect its need for exploration. And so again, this is another one that you can't tame. Like you have to like channel it in the right ways, like you were saying before.
Let's give it probably the more wilder placement, actually. Just like kind of like, we're gonna go dance and then we're gonna go do this and we're gonna do
Right.
that. And it's like, are you serious? Yeah.
You
It's like, like there's no way. Like there's no other way.
the dating apps in Colorado, everyone's profile is like, I'm just looking for my adventure buddy. So that is someone, Mars and
Right.
Sag needs somebody
Well,
who gets their adventure.
you better be ready, because when a Mars and Sag is ready to go on that, they're ready to like, it's like a bareback through the outback kind of like relationship, as far as I understand. Like, so
And
yeah.
I will say also, if you are upset with Mars and Sag, if you are angry, I do think one of the natural impulses is flightiness.
They
It's
also
going to depend on the rest of the chart.
I can say that this Mars might be a little bit more hot-headed than some of the other Marses, because it's mutable fire and it might just kind of express things as it goes, steam off, and then come back to its senses, ready for the next adventure kind of thing.
Right.
So it's definitely like one that can just like, Mars and Aries might build, but Mars and Sag might like burst a little bit and then kind of like get over it and
Yeah.
keep going.
But
So,
if your partner has this, um, I don't know. I would be curious to see if they would be someone who wants to more so, like you said, maybe either I guess it depends on what's going on, but maybe they'll just like express how they feel in the moment, or maybe they will want to literally leave. Like maybe they don't want,
if you
like
try to
that's how they show their anger.
You're talking to like a Mars and Sag. I'm joking. There's a war horse there. Like if you're trying to keep them locked up, more than the Venus and Sag, the Mars and Sag, I think, is really gonna like, you're gonna have a rough time with. Like they want to be free to do anything they desire,
Right.
and they're gonna try to like actualize that and
Right.
make their life as gregarious and abundant as possible.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Mars and Capricorn. You should take this away since this is your Mars.
I love Mars and Capricorn, and as being 4 different personal planets in fire, I'm so, thank God I have Mars in Cap. So Mars is considered exalted in Capricorn, and so this is from the ruler of Saturn for the general, in my eyes, that the soldier is now in a place where it can perform. Indifference, with it being in an earth sign, this is where it's very dedicated to a cause. And so Mars and Capricorn, I know when there's a certain mission and I'm spoken to in a form of like a mission, I will make it happen no matter what. The joke I've heard is this soldier will still go across the finish line with a broken leg. Like Mars and Capricorn was like, my leg is gone and I still did the mission. Like,
Nothing holds me
like
back.
it's definitely in a much more rudimentary, I'm seeing much more of kind of like a marine situation. We do what we need to do and we don't bitch. Like we do what needs to be done for the root structure, and we don't like, there's no real complaining. It's like winter, like, so when Mars is in Capricorn, we want to like kind of really dedicate to something and hold the line. I don't know why I get this, but sometimes I can connect because I'm Sun conjunct Mars. I think of like Conan the Barbarian pushing the wheel, and if no one's seen that old school movie, he's just pushing this wheel for an eternity. And I feel like Mars in Capricorn, when it knows what it needs to do, it wants to win, but it also wants to like reach that mountain climb peak. So it's much more about like the dedication of stamina. It's not just so much of Aries is just full gassing it. It's just like keep working. Don't keep going. It's like marching, if you will. This kind of rudimentary placement. Yeah. Any shares
Yeah,
of
I
that?
feel like it's the consistency of Taurus, the leadership of Leo, the resilience of Scorpio. Like it's got all these really, really beautiful combinations of of the signs, I feel like, because I think that these are some of the best like rulers in a way, or they have that same level of self-control typically when trying to achieve a goal. Like you said, like, I will not stop until I reach the end, because like giving up is the only real
Hmm.
failure.
Right.
I also feel like Mars in Capricorn, being an earth sign, might have anger that is not just going to blow up necessarily. I feel like
Hmm.
it's much more Capricorn. I mean, I have a Capricorn moon. There's a high degree of self control over emotions with the Capricorn moon. So I can imagine with a Mars in Capricorn that they don't just like express anger willy nilly. I feel like there might be some more constructive way of like, okay, I'm gonna tell people what's wrong. We're gonna get to the bottom of it, like instead of just blowing up and saying things that you don't mean in an impulsive way. How would you do? Would you say that for
Yeah,
you?
lots to share. I've definitely been in many circumstances with authority where I've been extremely angry at times, and I've had to like keep the professional lock. Like it's definitely, I
Professionalism.
definitely feel like this kind of like very, very militant. Just very, I like things military a little bit. Like I like that. Wake up, make bed, like like do
Yeah.
up and I'm not talk like ooga booga. I'm not talking like that. I'm talking about very professional oriented, making it a mission and getting it completed makes my Mars in Capricorn like very like let's go, and there's a part of like having that tailored Capricornic kind of professional business suit situation that's showing like we're here to be real here. We're here to make it real. Where Mars and fire has got all the enthusiasm, with Mars, and I feel it comes in an earth sign, it's much more like I want to practically build this and make it legit. Like I'm
And
seeing
I
like
have a plan.
mm-hmm,
I know where I'm going. It's
mm-hmm,
strategic. I'm making wise, um, well thought out decisions. I think all that with Mars and
mm-hmm.
Capricorn is really beneficial.
There's also a series of like, what was your mission statement kind of thing. And I'm making it sounds very military soldier, everything I'm saying right now. But I just think when Mars is in Capricorn, we're here to do it right. We're here to do the situation the way it needs to be done. Mars is in Capricorn as we speak. So I feel like this is definitely like, I'm tired, but I'm still going to work another 5 hours. I'm beat up. I'm cut. I'm bruised. I still know what I need to be doing. It's not going to get done without me, and I'm going to do it. And there's the kind of relentlessness that I feel like Mars and Capricorn will do. And I joked like you got your leg cut off, but I'm still got to do the thing. The Earth thing, it won't be built without it. So sometimes another thing, I guess, that we're talking about like between partners or males or females, is like definitely a strong work ethic, but it's also like something to do. There's something interesting with the feeling of control, and it's not that like Mars and Capricorn wants to control or needs things controlled, but it's like things that feel like, there's a sense of attractiveness where something is being able to been like put in a professional manner. Like, I don't know. I like my house to look like my room to look like a certain kind of way, even if I'm fire like expressed. There's like a certain way that like is speaking a little bit of this professionalism. I don't know that.
There's an order to your
Yeah.
life.
I think of iron could be just an iron sword. But I think with Capricorn, there's kind of this folding and making steel and feeling that feeling, kind of where the fire of Sag is coming to the earth of Cap is almost kind of want to like, let's forge this properly. And something about dedication to the craft, wherever that is for a certain person, means a lot to that person, especially if it's a female that, there's something there that wants to keep building upon. So.
So let's bring it back to relationships. How do you think this shows up in your relationship dynamics? Like, how do you feel like you, what motivates you? What do you find attractive? Like with this kind of energy,
Mhm.
how do you express anger? Like all those things.
Lots of questions. I would say Mars and Capricorn. I is free loving as a Sag I can be. I definitely appreciate the kind of dedication or the kind of more traditional things in life. Sometimes I appreciate traditions, and like I look at what has made it this far and what has lasted, and there's something there that I want to kind of like carry on within it. So when there's like a partner that's also embodying some of those areas, a little bit of the traditionalism, or kind of like, I wouldn't say clean cut, but like a little bit of that, it makes me feel like there's refinement. There's something about that word is like willing to work together and keep things refining. That feels like that's in a moment. As far as anger, like I've just been like, I'm actually astonished with myself in places that have been unacceptable, where I feel like 99% of humans I know would have quit, left, cursed out, lost their shit. And I even though I have Aries moon and sometimes I could be a hothead, I've genuinely held it. Like I've held it hard, or I'm not like, don't like, I've kept my cool, believe it or not, and been able to kind of walk through a difficult situation. So like Mars is still kind of like not wanting to be out of line. Different again, this is the antithesis of Mars and Cancer. It's like where I'm trying to show up at 100%. Like it's very like I'm not leaving my post.
Yeah.
And so as far as a relationship is, hey, if my partner needs something, my masculinity loves to come in.
I was going to
Like,
say Mars in Capricorn tends to take on responsibility of people. And that might come up in the relationship. Like, I think it's just an inherent quality. It's just like this kind of father provider type of
I feel
energy.
much fatherly energy. I
Yeah.
will say, like a lot of, I would actually identify and feel like sometimes I feel like there's fathering energy of
Right.
that you want to bring into the relationship so things can be led on a good path to taken care of.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like the biggest word coming up for me in this kind of dynamic is doing things that are constructive. You know, like Mars
Mm.
and Capricorn is like, let's make progress. If we're going to have anger, let's make it have a purpose. Let's make it go somewhere. Let's,
Right.
yeah, definitely.
No, I love that.
All
Yeah.
right.
If it has a purpose, yeah. Yeah.
All right. Mars in Aquarius. So, yeah, my boyfriend has this one. Again, opposite sign as my Mars in Leo. Um, I kind of feel like Mars and Aquarius are really rebellious people. Like,
For sure.
it's almost like, and sometimes with Aquarius, it's like they're rebelling with a cause, and sometimes they're rebelling just to rebel. You know, it's like,
For sure.
I just like, you're trying to tell me what to do. Well, I'm gonna like do this thing anyway. You know, like I'm gonna show you,
It,
and it's not in like a super confrontational way. But it's
no.
just like in a way of like, I need to assert my independence and individuality
Hmm.
in this situation and protect that part of myself at all costs.
Mars is now in the fixed air energy of Aquarius, the ruler of Uranus and Saturn. And so I definitely find this like Mars in air is never really direct. It's always kind of a deflector,
Yeah.
or like from the side, or like I think of the Quan Chi, like using your energy back or something like that. And I definitely find that it's definitely erratic and doesn't want to be put in a box. So like in other areas, people like have done a lot of research, a lot of reading, a lot of world history. So something like I've been able to have conversations when I'm really conversating with the Mars in Aquarius that goes like on all subjects,
Mm-hmm.
all subjects. That I also just definitely feel that whole like doesn't want to, almost like just wants to break the rules. There's a level of a spectrum here where it's like just to break the rules, just to break the rules is could be just like the Mars just getting its Aquarian fix in this way, or the highest form is really rebelling against truly ingenious ways of redesigning the whole game in itself.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all been playing this, but I'm gonna change. I'm gonna do something and start winning on a way that no one else was even looking at.
They're motivated by looking at the world from a different perspective. So,
Hmm.
how can I do things in an atypical way? Like they want that individualistic stamp on the things that they do. And again, just like so much freedom to be themselves. And so in a partnership, I feel like it's going to be super important for these individuals to be like not kind of controlled. You know, I think that would be the where Mars in Capricorn has an immense amount of self-control.
Mm-hmm.
Mars in Aquarius like wants to rebel against the traditions and structures and control that the confines of a relationship or
Mm-hmm.
any kind of structure can put them in.
There's definitely not a weak Mars, though. This is definitely not like a low pointed Mars of any kind. Like, I think Mars in Aquarius is quite strong. You know, I always think of lightning within Aquarius, but just how, like, kind of that unstable electricity could kind of be. Sometimes that's how I feel like Mars in Aquarius could, like, show up. There is definitely a dynamic, though. They know how to kind of work with energy or the nervous system. If they get involved with any kind of, like, either energy work, qigong, or like the ways to working with like neuroscience or the way people talk or move, I find that there's just an acuity. There's like an expression that they use this to their ability. Again, we talked about this, but Tony Robbins has Mars in the fifth house, in Aquarius. And like, you know, there's an ability to like kind of redirect and communicate with series of people. Now his chart does different ways, so we're not going to use that as a primary condition for how Mars in Aquarius expresses itself, but like it definitely wants to change the game and break through. Like, you know, I want to break through the way things are done. But if it doesn't have a catalyst of doing this, it could just be like just breaking rules to break rules and feel like, haha, like, you know, feeling good about that, you know? But then like when there's the ways of like everyone at work has done it this way, and it's almost the where Capricorn can get like in its like stubborn old traditional stuck in the way that it's doing stuff. Aquarius, when it evolves to this higher form, it can almost like let that Mars break the rules in another way and electrically charge itself to like, I built a whole different route. Not like Mars and Sag, where I'm doing something beyond what you thought I could do. I just changed, I put a different cube in that box and I made it fucking work for me. And so I just find like this Mars definitely needs uniqueness, eccentricity, needs to get a little weird and crazy sometimes, but I find it's a very fun placement for sometimes I do the most wildest social media posts when I have like Mars in Aquarius, like in transit or something. So, I mean, like, you know, it's like kind of just let yourself be free to be yourself. And it's different than Leo. It's different than Leo because it doesn't really care what you think about it. It's just like, I'm just going to express myself however way that I feel free to do it.
Yeah, so definitely needing a lot of space. They need a partner who is very open-minded and progressive because they are going to have unique kind of individual qualities about them. Even sexually, since Mars is a sexual planet, they might have unique desires. So just having a partner that's more open-minded can be really helpful. They might also have like a lot of eclectic interests that somehow have a thread that runs through them that maybe other people can't really tell.
Mm-hmm.
They seem maybe unrelated to each other, but then once you really start getting to the core of practices in all of these interests, you'll see that there's actually some kind of like a line that runs through it essentially. The other aspect of this is it is a fixed sign, so again this level of stubbornness.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like and I see this with my boyfriend. It's like stubbornness of like being different. And that's why I think that rebel energy comes from. It's like I'm not gonna do it this way. I don't care what other people think, and like kind of fixed in that mindset, which is totally fine if it's constructive, if it's helpful, if it's breaking patterns for a positive thing. And yeah, I think Mars again is that warrior. So it's really willing to fight for these different beliefs. And I think what's so beautiful about it is that, like you said, it's not like Leo. It doesn't really care as much how it's perceived. It's just trying to really just actualize its own unique desire. So yeah, just giving your partner the space to be themselves, and you know, not trying to control them, navigating arguments, like being open-minded, navigating arguments, realizing that they might be a little bit stubborn in them. I think knowing all those things can be really helpful for Mars and Aquarius.
Definitely not like telling them how to change. It's for them to choose if there's something that needs to shift, you know? Because Mars and Aquarius just no desire to like listen to how you tell them to live their life. Kind of vibe.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Male or female.
Right. All right. And let's wrap it up with Mars in Pisces.
Mars in Pisces is the most like mystical and my feeling metaphysical healing position for where Mars can be. It's not one of the strongest positions necessarily, but when Mars is positively aspected, there is something about the way similar to Mars and Scorpio, but there's something with like a healing position on how things move. There's a metaphysical kind of way. Um, LeBron James, as a basketball player, has Mars and Pisces in the 10th house. And you want to share
Yeah,
something
I
on
was
this?
literally just gonna say like Pisces rules the feet. So like people with Mars
Mm-hmm.
and Pisces, they're just like
Great footwork.
great footwork, like dancers, ice skaters, I guess basketball. You're just it's a lot of footwork. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Definitely, they would say, yeah, the feet, dancing, all that kind of stuff. But I find that there's something about the way someone moves that might find a flow. And there's
It's like
something with that kind
graceful.
of like dedication to a practice. They're also very reclusive. There's definitely kind of the cliche monk like energy with this, where they might like be so involved in their practice that Mars wants to connect into the kind of the connection with this, like spiritual, like they're really good healers, but it's almost kind of like they might want to like not be, their ego doesn't really kind of want to get muddled with so many different people and get more connected in their practice. So I see it's the ruler of the 12th house that like Mars and Pisces almost might recluse to go dedicate itself to its practice. They take their work quite seriously. They dive into their work, but they almost get lost into it too. So like kind of so that Mars can be realized. And last touches, I guess, is just like they're really trying to finding that art of the flow in what they do. And there's always some kind of like some kind of magic to the way that their like ego or career kind of takes off in the way they hit it. Yeah.
Yeah, and Billie Eilish has this placement, which I think is interesting because
Mm.
she, yeah, I mean, Pisces is a very creative energy. If it's not expressed spiritually, it's definitely expressed creatively or both. I think that you can see that really strongly in her. She's got her own kind of eccentric way of expressing her creativity. Um, and that's obviously going to be a huge motivation for these people. But definitely, like what you were saying in terms of the flow, I think that life kind of happens to them a little bit more because Mars is more about our self directed energy. But being in the sign of Pisces, which is about surrendering a lot of the times, I think that a large degree of them being like self initiators and just like the Capricorn energy of being really dedicated and showing up every day, it just doesn't really align that way with the Mars and Pisces. It's much more of this intuitive flow
Mm-hmm.
going off of the energy of the world, the current. And that I think that they also can tap into that for their work and can be motivated by kind of riding the waves of society, of the collective, and of kind of where their life is meant to be going. So it's almost like a spiritual hand kind of guiding them invisibly rather than them having like this one objective and I'm going to make it happen no matter what. It's like I have this objective, but it's divine inspiration. I flow with the ebbs and flows of life. So it's a different kind of way, I think, of navigating things that is, again, much more creative and
Mm-hmm.
spiritual in nature.
Definitely feel there's creativity is something really big here, but I find like they might not go in the kind of the way Mars and Earth might dedicate to a situation. It wants to find that flow. So sometimes I feel like Mars and Pisces almost kind of like that surfer waiting for that wave all the time. And so like if they go, they might say hi and connect with people and be in charismatic, but there's also something that is healing within Mars and Pisces that wants to come out. Something about the ego actually wants to like do something in that kind of way, that can be like healing or even inspiring or mesmerizing. So it's almost like I want to leave, like say what's up to people, but almost kind of like fade off in the back to dedicate more into the work. And let's get back into that flow. Let's find that one flow that's like not with all the other fishes, just kind of like with its own kind of like disposition. So I just find it's like I'm never going to be able to find that flow if I'm connecting with all these different energies. So it's like I kind of look at it like I'm going to sit here and wait for that perfect wave, or I'm going to wait for these so I see more of a monk kind of like energy again.
Like
I,
solitary, and in a relationship, I could see them
like
definitely needing that solo time to recharge.
I have a roommate, or I've had a roommate, and he is double Pisces, sun rising with Mars in the first house in Pisces.
Mm.
So boom, super boom, Mars in Pisces, and he is one of the greatest massage therapists ever, and gets is changed the philosophy on how traditional massage I think gets done to a level, and it's almost all about the flow. It's all about the ease to resistance. It's not about pushing or forcing or like anything like all the other Marses we've kind of expressed in a way. It's actually like letting the energy do its work of and taking the path of least resistance, where Mars is becoming more of a healing position and letting its ego kind of really be seen. And definitely he's one to kind of like not really get too muddled up with everyone else's energy, kind of just go more into his solitary prepping practice and dedicate to the practice. So I couldn't find a better example for
Yeah.
that.
Also, I feel like Mars and Pisces tend to have a very gentle nature.
Hmm.
So in a relationship dynamic, it's going to be important for them to be with compassionate people. I would be a little bit more worried, obviously depending on the rest of their chart, but for this placement to end up in kind of like an empath narcissist dynamic, which sometimes happens,
Mm,
where one person is so giving and so compassionate and so gentle and very slow to anger, if at all, that they attract maybe someone who takes more advantage of them, or gets angry, that kind of thing. So this is more like the submissive type or the pacifist type. And so in a relationship dynamic, they really, again, need somebody who won't take advantage of that,
hmm.
and who will honor that in them, will give them the kind of gentleness back that they are giving out.
It is super compassionate.
Super
Super
compassionate.
compassionate, and like even maybe within partnership or romance, the courting could be like much more of like romantic, dreamy, creative, even a little bit like a magician in a way, and be like kind of like create that kind of mystical approach, like it was divine meeting kind of some situations potentially. But with such a sensitive archetype, definitely does not mean they're weak in any shape or form, but it does mean that they're a lot more sensitive to ways that things go about in their life. So like, there's a level of compassion in understanding how to inspire and be much more kind of progressive in the way that you approach things, not like, being this is definitely not getting an artistic child to kind of do what you say by giving them rules and order and direction. They might be fueled by many other different, giving a vision on what's possible can drive this Mars in a way better light than many others. Hmm.
Absolutely. Is there any other way that you feel like this could come across in relationships? Because one way that I feel like it could is a little bit of like guilt or even self sacrificing and selflessness at times,
The,
um,
hmm
a potential of this expression.
I would say I think about I really believe that Jesus was even like a Pisces. So sometimes this Mars is almost wanting to be a lot more sacrificing, a little bit of martyrdom. Um, Definitely does not want to be the one to lead in violence of any kind. Different than Mars in Libra, but like Mars in Pisces is very sensitive and emotional. So there's not saying they won't outburst in anger or be upset at the world or be upset at circumstances and really need a good channel to vent. We are talking about a water sign, so like there's still like an area where it needs expression and needs healing and needs like a space and time. And this and as a dynamic, this should definitely be nurtured in many other places. But like, Mars and Pisces might go more on the default of like not standing up for itself, being kind of somewhat taken advantage of. Also, maybe like sulking and taking in circumstances that like you do not deserve, or like, you know, like
Yeah.
allowing yourself to stand up for yourself and own into your value more instead of being overly compassionate sometimes. And there's just needing some balance there. Yeah.
Yeah, like if you have a partner with this, really encouraging them to stand up for themselves when necessary. Because I think with Mars in Pisces, again, there can be like they are highly sensitive and emotional, but it's not gonna be like the kind of traditional outburst. It might be turned inward, or it might be expressed outwardly in an indirect way. They might not be really good at saying, this is what I need, I'm going to work on this. Like
Mm-hmm.
they might just kind of be more sort of like the Libra energy, more concerned with the benefit of or the good of others, and sometimes, the Mars and Pisces individual might take on too much for others. I definitely see this in like the savior archetype. So not even just, like ignoring one's own needs, but how can, like, they might even sometimes be gravitated towards helping people that aren't even really helping themselves. That's always like a potential with
It's
this.
like some beware of being giving food to the person that's really not gonna take care of themselves and actually buy food. Wink, wink. Like, you know,
Yeah.
they're not like making sure that it's good. It's energy going to a good cause and going to someone. It's like beyond just being compassionate to be compassionate. It's actually got some benefic. It's helping something for someone. Does that make sense? Like, I mean, you're not giving. You're not just giving to the homeless man that like is gonna go buy drugs with it later because you feel bad because he's there. Like, you know, you need someone to also meet that they're gonna help themselves too. Much more kind of the Virgo approach and like what is actually being
Yeah.
created. Yeah.
And that's why I think I was mentioning earlier about guilt is like Mars and Pisces might just kind of feel or take on more guilt of like, oh, I need to do this. I need to help this person. I like feel bad. I feel guilty that I have all
Mm-hmm.
this and they don't. Like just so much compassion. I think that can come across sometimes as guilt as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that
Yeah.
was great.
That was
Thank you so
awesome.
much for coming on
Totally. Thank
as
you.
always. So, yeah, let's just go
Love it.
ahead and wrap up by telling people where they can find us. I know this will be on your channel, so if it is, you can find me at willowsbloom.com or willowsbloom on YouTube.
And
I also offer astrology readings. Go ahead.
no, you're good. And you can find me, Ricardo Zivar, on my YouTube channel, The Infinite Soul, SOL, and on Instagram, and send me an email or a DM on there. So,
Yeah, and if you want, I will have all the links in the description box below. Definitely
boom.
encourage you to book a reading with us if you want to learn more about your Mars or your synastry. And I hope that you guys have a beautiful day.
100% epic. Thank you.
Bye.